Ain't it all brand new? Every day, actually. So today we're going to talk about the third chapter in the Science of Mind textbook, which is an introductory set of chapters. And this is about what it does. And of course, we're talking about the big it. The big it being the thing itself, as Ernest Holmes called it. And the thing itself is the first cause, spirit, source, universe, the invisible essence that we know is present in, around, and through all things. The thing itself, whatever it is. And we know we can't name it because it's ineffable, it's unnameable. And yet we have to put a name on it because that's who we are. We like to name things, and so that's what we do. And then last week we talked about the way it works, and the way it works is it gives. It gives energy. It gives ideas. It gives inspiration, imagination, all of these gifts. It gives to us. It gives us curiosity. It gives us that intuition and imagination that we talked about last week that inspire us and allow us to create what has not been here before. And of course, Holmes says we're not really creating, we're just inviting that new idea to come through us that brings forth that evolutionary impulsion that is trying to be born through us. And so we open to it. Now, today we're talking about what it does. So we know that it works by giving. But the thing about it is, the givingness is love. But it works through law. So Ernest Holmes, who founded the Science of Mind and Spirit back in the 20th century, based on ancient teachings, said, all is love, yet all is law. Love rules through law. Love is the divine givingness, law is the way. Love is spontaneous, law is impersonal. Love points the way, law makes the way possible. So what are we talking about? Law, what are we talking about here? Well, of course, we know in the physical world that we have lots of laws. Gravity. Okay, there's a law for you, you know. And did that come on a tablet from heaven? No, we figured it out. We figured out how it worked by trial and error. We figured out the laws of flotation. How can you float an iron thing on water? We figured it out. How can you fly? The laws of aeronautics. We figured out through trial and error. And I don't know if you've ever seen those pictures that they used to show of all those people trying to fly. You know, and they were really, you know, they were falling, but they didn't know it yet. And so just, you know, flapping wings and all kinds of things. Oh, man. So, you know, sometimes our learning is really painful. But we get it. You know, we figure out by what doesn't work. You know, I think it was Edison who said, I've never failed. I only found 1,000 ways it didn't work. And so that's what we do. We experiment. Well, the same thing is true of the mystics. The mystics of every religion have gotten an insight. They've opened up to something beyond the knowing that we can come to through reason and, you know, looking at the world, that there is something beyond the world, and they connected with that ineffable essence. And when they connected with that ineffable essence, they got some information about how things work in the world so that we can make the world a better place. And so they come to us and say, you know, it might help if you realized that you were one with everybody else, and it might help if you were kind and compassionate and forgiving. And they came up with these laws about forgiveness and compassion and oneness that were intended to help us to bring the presence of God into realization here on planet Earth. So all of these people also were human beings. And that means that they framed the information that they received through their own perceptions, through their own culture, through their own family, just like we do. We filter everything coming into us. We think, oh, there's reality. Well, actually, we are all filtering reality all the time. There's a thing called a scotoma. It's a blind spot. It's something that we don't even see it because it's not part of our reality. And there was a wonderful explanation in the movie, I think it was What the Bleep Do We Know? Remember that one? And there was a scientist who was explaining that when Columbus, sailed into the West Indies, thinking, of course, that it was the East Indies, but anyway, he sailed into the West Indies, and a lot of the people could not see the ships. The ships were not something that they had in their realm. When they showed up in their little boats, they saw them, and they saw that they were human beings, and they were in these little boats, and they were dressed weird and all that kind of stuff, but they didn't even see the ships. The shaman was the one who had to do a ritual to reveal the ships that were out there because the people on the shore could not see them. They had this blind spot. So it's important for us to remember that we all have these blind spots, that our perceptions are usually limited by our families and our upbringing and our religions and our languages. We don't have words for things. I mean, the Eskimos have like 26 words for snow because that's where they live and it's the infinite variety, but not us. We don't need that. There's just snow, rain, But we get to realize that there is a vast array of perception. I don't know about you, I lived through the 60s and we experimented a lot with perception. So I have to say, I've had some mind-expanding experiences in that past life, and I'm grateful for them because they did open me up to perceiving more than I used to, more than I had in the past, so that I was available to see more of what really was out there. The mystic William Blake said, if the doors of perception were cleansed, we would see things as they really are, infinite. We would see things as they really are, infinite. And Ernest Holmes, who was a mystic and who studied the mystics of every religion, he talks about this mystical substance. He talks about, astronomers have always looked at planets and stars and meteors and all these kinds of things. When they started looking at the vacuum of space, decided to look between all of the things at the space. And what they observed was matter foaming, they called it, foaming into existence. There was nothing there, and then there was something there. Now, when Holmes is talking about what the mystics have seen, he said that there is this primordial substance out of which all things come. He says they've described this as a fine, white, brilliant stuff forever falling into everything, a substance indestructible and eternal. And it is our thought that brings this manifest into this reality. It is our thought that invites this primordial substance to take form. And maybe it takes form as an idea. And then we bring that idea into being. Everything in this room started out as an idea. Right? This podium, this lamp, this fan, all of it started out as somebody's idea of solving a problem, helping something along, some idea of good that wanted to be expressed, because the ultimate essence of this thing is goodness. Is goodness. So our thought has power. Our thought has power. So it's important to think about what you're thinking about. I have a little sign in my office that says, "Think before you think." Because what we're thinking is working with that primordial stuff. Now the thing is, most of our thoughts are sort of so fleeting and don't have any particular emotion associated with them. They just sort of don't bring anything into being because it's sort of, messy. It's not taking form. But if we have an idea that is really close to our hearts, and we put emotion and feeling into that thought, we are inviting the universe to have that primordial substance come into manifestation. We're inviting it to draw to us the resources, the people, all of it that needs to happen in order for us to accomplish whatever it is that idea was. And so we're just inviting that through that perception. But the other problem is that we also, God bless you, that we also have this tendency to think about what our worst case scenario, what we're afraid of. What's the worst thing that could happen? And we think about it, and we get afraid of it. And guess what happens? We are putting an idea out associated with great feeling, and the universe is impersonal. It does not care what that feeling is, whether you want it or you don't. It's that thought coupled with that feeling, and there you go. Here it comes. When an analogy we frequently make is the idea is a seed, and the law is the dirt. The dirt does not care whether you are planting tulips or turnips. It doesn't care. Whatever you plant is what it will nourish and bring forth. The same thing with the law. What we're thinking about continuously with feeling is going to bring us that in being. A small example, my sister, when she was going through her training to be a technical lab specialist, one of the things she hated was to watch them doing spinal taps on children, because it's a very painful process. And she couldn't even stay in the room. She had to leave. When her son was 3, he got leukemia. And he had to get not only spinal taps, but he got chemo in his spine. So she had to sit there and see her son get that and hold his hand and, be with him. So she had to release that fear entirely, because it just, what she feared most. And that's the lesson of Job, ancient book in the Bible. What I feared most has come upon me. Because that law says, whatever you think about continuously with great feeling is yours. Is yours. So we have to get beyond our feeling. If we find ourselves coming up with these fearful thoughts, what we say is, cancel, cancel. I'm not going for that thought. I am going to go for the good thought. Because the nature of this thing is goodness. My dear mentor, the Reverend Dr. Edward Viljoen, has written a book called Ordinary Goodness. And what he says is, goodness is it's like ordinary. And, so we take it for granted. We take goodness for granted. He said, the news is always about the spectacular, the horrific, the big deal. The everything that's out of the ordinary gets on the news. So the ordinary goodness of people to one another, the ordinary goodness of the divines for 12 years organizing this food every month, the ordinary goodness of helping a neighbor, the ordinary goodness of the small acts of kindness that we perform every day. We don't see those on the news, and yet they are there. And so what he is saying, what Edward is saying is, we need to remember that we are good, that there is something within us. Meister Eckhart said that there's a light in us, and all of the mystics say this. There is a light in us. And we have to remember that light, because that light is goodness, our own goodness. And to see that goodness and demonstrate it, and to call attention to it. I don't know if you remember, a few years ago, Liberty Mutual Insurance had a series of commercials where they showed someone performing an act of kindness and somebody else sees them doing that. And when they see them doing that, they do an act of kindness. And then somebody sees them doing that, and then they do an act of kindness. And somebody sees them doing that, and they do an act of kindness. So there's this paying it forward, this realization of kindness, this realization of goodness. And so that is our call, is to be good to one another, to be kind to one another, to really see that we are one, and to remember that goodness is not new, ordinary goodness is not newsworthy. We're not going to see it on TV. We may see it in social media. We may see that infinite variety of kitties and doggies and puppies and, people doing nice things for each other and things like that, because, goodness is not dead. We just, are looking for it. And there it is. And so we appreciate that it's there. Now, the other thing that this spirit does, on our money it says, e pluribus unum, out of many, one. That's what the eagle is holding in his mouth. Out of many, one. That is the motto on the Great Seal of the United States of America. But in metaphysics, we say, and I don't know if this is proper Latin, but we would say, e unum pluribus. We would say, out of one, many. Out of one, many. That we all come from that one source in infinite variety, in infinite uniqueness, that each of us are here to express something uniquely, to express something that is ours. And we're all doing it in this great tapestry of life, and everyone is contributing to that in some way. And what we want to make sure is that we are contributing to it in a creative, productive way. Because we do have freedom of will, which means we can be destructive as well as creative. So what are we going to choose? Are we going to choose to be creative? Are we going to choose to be kind? Are we going to choose to be compassionate? Are we going to choose to hate and to fear and to diminish? Or are we going to expand? There is a New Thought teacher from the late 19th and early 20th century named Thomas Troward, who was one of the teachers for Ernest Holmes. And his name is Thomas Troward, and he wrote this: "My mind is a center of divine operation. The divine operation is always for expansion and fuller expression. And this means the production of something beyond what has gone before, something entirely new, not included in past experiences, though proceeding out of it. Therefore, since the divine cannot change its inherent nature, it must operate in the same manner with me. Consequently, in my own special world, of which I am the center, it will move to produce new conditions, always in advance of any that have gone before." So we open to expansion. We open to new conditions. We open to seeing things in a new way. And inviting those gifts of curiosity and intuition and imagination to guide and direct us to what is ours to do. What is ours to do in this particular moment in time, in this particular place, in this particular wonderful experience of life that we get to have right here and right now. And so I wanted to read a small reading from a wonderful book called The Book of Awakening by Mark Nepo. And he says, "The further I wake into this life, the more I realize that God is everywhere, and the extraordinary is waiting quietly between the skin of all that is ordinary. Light is in both the broken bottle and the diamond, and music is in both the flowing violin and the water dripping from the drainage pipe. Yes, God is under the porch as well as on top of the mountain. And joy is both in the front row and the bleachers, if we are willing to be where we are." If we are willing to be where we are, and to see the goodness all around us, and to realize that the ordinary goodness is absolutely extraordinary, and celebrate it, and celebrate it. And so our affirmation for today is, I am open to a greater experience of goodness. I am open to a greater experience of goodness. I am open to a greater experience of goodness. I am open to a greater experience of goodness. And so it is.